Hi everyone, welcome to today's CASM seminar. I'm Aslam Young, CASM Research Fellow and lead for our Poverty, Precarity, Saving and Debt Research theme. We are delighted to welcome Dr Hussan Aslam from Coventry University. He's with us today to talk about his project, Reducing Financial Vulnerability within Birmingham's Muslim Community. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Hussan, and then I'll hand over to him for his presentation, which will be around 30 minutes and followed by a Q&A and comments session. Yes, so Hussan Aslam is a researcher at the Center for Business and Society at Coventry University. He's currently working on research that focuses on financial exclusion and inclusion of consumers. He is also working on research that looks into effectiveness of financial education and capability initiatives. His previous research explored the cultural changes that UK banking institutions have tried to introduce following the 2008 financial crisis. So thank you so much, Hussan, for joining us today. We look forward to hearing about your project. The floor is yours, and please do go ahead.
Thanks very much. So thanks very much everyone for joining me to hear about my project on reducing financial vulnerability within Birmingham's Muslim community. The project was funded by the Barrow Cadbury Trust, and I worked alongside my colleagues, Professor Sally Dibb and Lindsay Appleyard. So just a little bit about the Centre for Business and Society. So it's part of Coventry University's Faculty of Business and Law, and it's home to 35 specialist researchers. And our research focuses on behaviours and individuals and organisations to achieve better outcomes for the economy and society. And much of my work sits within CBC's Responsible Community Finance team. So we worked with the local community to co-create a resource that provides culturally and religiously appropriate financial guidance. And we focus on the individuals from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi Muslim communities in Birmingham. We look to develop a resource that aims to help people to manage their personal finances in a way that takes into account their religious and cultural observances and raise awareness of Sharia compliant financial services and products. And we wanted to use these findings to develop a two-part toolkit. So the first part is a tailored financial information and guidance materials for members of the Muslim community that we would deliver in numerous ways, which we'll cover shortly. And then part two is an action plan for mosques, community organisations and national organisations to disseminate the guidance materials and improve engagement with the Muslim community. So briefly, just before I go into this project, it's quite important to kind of understand the background of how we arrived at this project and where the original source materials come from. So originally I was part of a project that was funded by the Money Advice Service, so part of their What Works Fund. And it was about delivering financial education to financially squeezed individuals through workshops and online. And this education improved individuals' financial behaviours who were more likely to budget and reduce spending, and in some cases increase their savings. We then took some of these materials and adapted them for an app format, and I led the development of this app. And this was called the Money Skills app, and you can access this via moneyskillsapp.com. We do also have it natively on Apple and Android as well, although I think the App Store is currently we're doing some updates for the app, so that may not be live, but you can still access it via moneyskillsapp.com. And this app was used by we worked with a number of organisations such as credit unions, and it's had an impact on policy and practices of national and community organisations who were working to reduce financial vulnerability. So the Money Skills app was to provide free tools and content that helps users to manage their money better. The app's content was adapted from the original MAS Managing My Money project. And we just kind of made them optimized for mobile format, and it was designed to help people improve their well-being, their financial well-being, and those who may struggle to deal with unexpected bills or expenses. And the app included short animated clips to make it quite digestible for people to just follow along rather than having to read a long guide. We also then rewrote a lot of the materials into shorter ebooks that they could follow alongside the animated clips, as well as an interactive budget planner and a template to input their financial goals. So here's just a few screenshots of the Money Skills app. So we've got the the interactive budget planner on the left, where you can then, it gives you a breakdown of your spending in a chart, and then where you can include your goals, and then the actual materials, which takes you through how to fill in the budget planner, and also the goals template. We had roughly about 8 ebooks and also 8 animated videos to go alongside that. So coming back to our project on the Muslim community. So why the Muslim community? So the Muslim community in the UK experiences the greatest economic disadvantage of any group. They're at increased risk compared to non-Muslims to experience neighbourhood deprivation, housing, educational and health disadvantage and unemployment. These groups are at high risk of poverty and financial hardship with low rates of pension enrolment and saving provisions. Muslims still face a disproportionate level of deprivation, with 40% of Muslim population in England residing in the most deprived fifth of local authority districts. That's almost 482,000 more Muslims now live in these the most deprived locations compared to 2011. And we had a particular focus on Muslim women as well within the project. So Muslim women have the highest rate of economic inactivity in the UK at 58% compared to 27% of all working age women in the UK. And Muslim women from a Pakistani and Bangladeshi background are particularly at higher risk of financial vulnerability and poverty compared to other groups. And why Birmingham? So I'm from Birmingham myself, so I'm part of that demographic. I'm of a Pakistani background as well, so I know the area quite well and the people in the community. But also Birmingham is home to 341,811 Muslims, and that's actually the highest concentration of Muslims in any area in the UK. And the vast majority of those are from a Pakistani or Bangladeshi background. And 4 out of 5 of the most deprived wards of Birmingham have significant Pakistani and Bangladeshi populations, highlighting the financial vulnerability of this community in Birmingham. And some of the challenges of engaging with the Muslim community across the UK, particularly in sort of finance and financial management. So members of this community are often reluctant to engage with mainstream lenders, interest-based products due to their religious beliefs. And that was actually from a report back in 2006, which is quite a while ago. But when we were doing our review of things and reports and the literature, there was actually very little has changed since 2006, and that's why I'm still citing that. We'll go a little bit into it further on. And some of those who self-exclude from conventional banking services may also not engage with Sharia-compliant financial products due to skepticism, problems of affordability, and lack of knowledge about what is available. Research carried out by Gatehouse Bank, which is a Sharia-compliant bank, found that 61% of respondents were skeptical of Sharia-compliant financial products. The research concluded that there is a lack of clear, accessible information about what products and services are available, as well as confusion over permissible banking practices. So some research carried out by Wassami in 2009 concluded that more needed to be done to cater for lower income individuals who are looking for Sharia-compliant financial products and services. Mainstream financial institutions could do more to cater for less affluent UK Muslims. And again, so that research took place in 2009. And when we were reviewing the literature and what had changed since then, very little had changed, and there wasn't really any significant body of work that had really shifted or moved things along for the Muslim community. And we actually reviewed the Chartered Institute of Securities Investments Islamic Finance qualification materials, and we went through these. And after review of these, they were very complex, and it just highlighted how much of these products were actually still aimed for much more affluent investors rather than just kind of grassroots Muslim community who are looking to save and manage their finances. Additionally, the Department of Work and Pensions in 2006 identified a need for increased advice and education on financial products and the development of additional products which are acceptable to Muslims. And again, very little has actually changed since that report came out. So one of the key things that really made the project a success was co-creating with community organisations and also developing our advisory board. So they were really key to the success of this project and gaining access to the community and understanding the key issues that this community faced. And our advisory board was made of a mix of local community organisations, local faith-based organisations, and national charities and Islamic fintechs. And these were the organisations that helped us with our project. We've got Islamic Finance Guru, who who delivers, who's a fintech and delivers materials via their social media outlets. And we've got Central Jamia Mosque, which is one of the largest mosques in Birmingham. They're actually one of our key partners where we held our workshops and also recruited participants from. And then we've got Small Heath Community Forum, which is a small community organisation that provides advice locally to community members on benefit advice and how to fill out forms and those types of things. And then the Dolphins Women's Centre, so they were really key with us as well. We wanted to make sure that we had access to Muslim women and they were part of the project, because they're a particularly underserved group, both in terms of kind of financial capability, financial education, but also in these types of projects, it's quite easy to have a predominantly Muslim male participation. And we also had the Muslim Council of Britain, who has 500 Muslim organisations as part of their membership. So they have quite a wide reach, and the Aziz Foundation, who supports work in this area. And so they were great in terms of helping us kind of with their network and access to the network. And we have the National Zakat Foundation, which people can pay their charitable donations to, but they also have funds which can fund sort of hardship relief funds and things like that. So there are 3 phases of the project. So we had the phase 1, which is scoping, review, and co-creation. So we held a scoping workshop with the advisory board to understand the key issues that the advisory board felt and what good looked like, what were the good outcomes would be for the advisory board members. We also then held a co-creation workshop, which I'll speak a little bit more in a moment. And we carried out 11 key informant/expert interviews, again, to kind of get a further and a deeper understanding, but we also included organisations that didn't particularly focus on dealing with the Muslim community. So debt advice charities, for example, to understand, what they knew and how they engaged with the Muslim community and what issues they had engaging with the Muslim community. And then we had the main intervention phase, where we held 4 face-to-face participant workshops. 2 were held with women in the Dolphins Women's Centre, and then another 2 in Gam Gulf Sharif Mosque, which was made up of male participants. And I hosted those workshops. Then we had 25 pre and post intervention participants who had pre and post intervention interviews. And then now we're at the phase of dissemination of the materials and rolling out the toolkit, where we then adapted what we learned from the materials and how they worked during the main intervention phase, and then have created some digital materials and also animated videos, which I'll take you through. So the co-creation phase was really important and really important element of the project. So we held a co-creation workshop with volunteers and community members at the Dolphins Women's Centre in Washwood Heath, Birmingham. The co-creation workshop aimed to gain a better understanding of the lived experience of community members and their financial journey and needs, particularly from a perspective of Muslim women in the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community. The workshop allowed us to explore the barriers that prevent Muslim women from feeling in control of their finances and the challenges they have accessing existing financial help and guidance. The participants helped generate ideas on how we can deal with some of these issues and how they can be resolved, and how we can tailor some of the existing tools so we can be better communicated with them and shared most effectively. And so it was quite an interactive workshop. So the women and the participants put together some profiles of consumer profiles, essentially, of different, I think predominantly they focused on women within different age categories and some of the issues that they dealt with, so the mental health issues, financial issues, marital things, some of the key issues that we would need to kind of navigate when producing these materials. And some of them, obviously, we wouldn't be able to address in the materials, but some of the issues that they raise, in future materials and content that we can produce, hopefully we can kind of add to it as well. And that's just what you're seeing on screen is kind of, we used some whiteboard, magic whiteboard sheets, which were on the walls, and then they could, through the discussion, they were kind of adding to it and writing their thoughts onto these. So we're able to use these in our analysis. And following the co-creation workshop, we then put together the actual main intervention phase workshops and the materials. And much of the materials started off, we started off from the Money Skills app. So the budgeting, both working out your income and spending, they were taken from from the app and actually just adapted and tailored for the Muslim community. And then we had a few sections that were very specifically developed just for this project. So the Zakat guide, which Zakat is sort of compulsory charitable donations from Muslims, but we'll go into that in a moment. And then also the Islamic finance basics. So it basically just introduced participants to Sharia compliant finance. Many of them knew very little about it or wanted to know more about it. We weren't endorsing any particular products or organizations. It was just to give a brief overview so they had the options to understand the conventional banking products and also what was available in Sharia compliant finance. So I won't take you through the entire all the materials from the workshop. I'm just going to touch on a few. So one of the ways that we tailored some of the materials, so in this instance, the budgeting section, was to include scripture or hadiths, Islamic scriptures or hadith. And it came out from some of the expert interviews and also the co-creation workshop, where it would be quite effective to include this, as it makes people makes community members pay a little bit more attention when it's kind of when you quote in the Quran or hadith. And I think an example was given in the workshops from the co-creation workshop and from in the expert interviews, where I think it was the NHS had an initiative on promoting breastfeeding within the Muslim community, and they used Quranic verses and hadiths to support that. And hadiths are sort of a collection of stories, statements, and practices of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which kind of people try to emulate, and essentially it's kind of the precedents to go alongside the kind of the word of God, in which we believe is the Quran. And then the budget planner. So the budget planner that we had in the Money Skills app and the previous maths project were very popular. It was very well received from all the participants from those previous projects. So what we wanted to do here was just tailor it slightly so it's a little bit more relevant for the Muslim community. Typically, when you go for a budget planner, it will include things like expenditures on food and sometimes alcohol, and also expenditures over Christmas, which are a little bit less relevant for the Muslim community. So we've included, for example, we've included a section for zakat and also other charitable donations, which calls sadaqah and lillah, and then also Eid presents and Eid clothes as a tradition of buying new Eid clothes for the family around Eid. So that's an expense that many people need to account for. So just slight tweaking, and then the rest of the sections are just kind of what you'd see in a generic budget planner, but it's just that slight tweaking and tailoring made it more relevant for the Muslim community members. And then zakat, again, zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and requires Muslims to give 2.5% of their eligible wealth each year to help Muslims in need. So we just use the Quranic verse to support, the importance of zakat. And what we found, what I knew kind of from my own experiences around zakat is a lot of Muslims, and pretty much all Muslims, are aware of their obligation to pay zakat. But very, very few kind of fully understand how to calculate, how to work out the zakat, the minimum wealth that is needed, that you calculate your zakat on, which is called nisab, and also the categories of people who are eligible to receive zakat. And so I've speaking to people before the project, I knew many people would often overpay their zakat, not knowing how to calculate correctly or how to, what assets they need to calculate the zakat on. So I knew people who, maybe might have been in a difficult financial situation themselves, but then we're overpaying in the zakat. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because they're just ultimately giving it to charity. But if you're already in a financially vulnerable situation yourself, the way that you can reduce it, but while also fulfilling your zakat obligations, is a great way. So we just gave people a guide and took them through zakat, because as well, often people would feel embarrassed to ask these questions about zakat because it's kind of just a normative practice where everyone kind of assumes everyone knows how to calculate zakat and pay zakat, and you must pay zakat every year and things like that. So people are kind of reluctant to kind of get guidance or ask questions about it. So we just put people through it so they're well equipped to calculate their zakat accurately. And this is one of the things that wasn't really tailored particularly for the Muslim community, but was actually quite key in all the iterations of these materials, was focusing on small changes. And this really had an impact on how people engage with the materials, and that was really brought out in the post workshop interviews across all the projects. So it's just focusing on taking taking small steps towards reaching their goals, and encourage them to think about what's most important to them and make small changes to reach those goals, rather than going sort of doing too much too quickly and too soon, like people might do, say, in dieting or on fitness. It's not about cutting back completely and not going out at all or enjoying yourself at all, because that's not a particularly sustainable way of budgeting or dieting or doing fitness. So making much smaller changes to reach your goals is much more effective and sustainable. And then we took them through the Islamic finance basics, so just giving them an overview of Islamic finance and the terms involved in terms of why interest is not allowed or prohibited in Islam, and which is often referred to as riba. And then also giving them an overview, because many didn't know, they were aware of Sharia compliant finance existing, but didn't know much about it or didn't really know about the banks. And one of the questions people often ask is how do they make their money if they're not charging interest? So Islamic banks make their payments on deposits and make their profits from deposits and selling of Sharia compliant investments. So typically this is Sharia compliant mortgages. And also people are concerned about the regulation and how these banks compare to conventional banks in terms of regulation and how safe their money is if they put it in a Sharia compliant bank. So we just ran through outlining that they're actually regulated in the same way by the same bodies, the PRA and the FCA, and also deposits are protected by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. So following the workshops, we then ran some participant interviews, post-workshop interviews, and we got some really great feedback. Many of them found the budget planner particularly useful, and a key impact that emerged with the post-workshop interviews was the improvement in conversation participants having with their family and friends. And many participants were sharing what they had learned in the workshops and highlighting in the post-workshop interviews that their family and friends were also interested in either accessing the materials or attending workshops if we were to run more, which is great feedback for us, and showed that people were really engaged with what we were delivering to them. And just a few quotes from the data, so in their own words. So we had Sharifa, who spoke about how she was more, these are pseudonyms, by the way, so it's not their actual participant names. She spoke about how she feels much more confident and she feels that she can manage her money better. Before she would spend and didn't always buy things that she necessarily needed. But now since the workshop, she feels like she's got a better handle on that and a better idea of how to manage her money. And then we've got Cameron, who he was in his 20s and he quite enjoyed the workshop and spoke about how he shared the materials with his dad, and his dad was also quite interested in attending the workshop. And that was quite interesting, just because from a cultural perspective, sort of a young man kind of sharing financial management tips with their dad. Typically, kind of culturally, the dad wouldn't be particularly perceptive to hearing about it, but it's great that his dad was quite interested in learning more about the materials that we delivered and was interested in attending a workshop if we were to run more, which the plan is to do that. And then we also had Arifa, who said that much of her conversations following the workshop were actually about the workshop and sharing the materials and kind of pushing her family to get to have a look at the materials. And so some more feedback from the workshop. So a lot of the women spoke about how they were previously, their husbands, the women that were married, were in charge of the household bills, with some of them just dealing with primarily the groceries and expenses relating to their children, and didn't really have much of an overview of the wider finances of the household. But following the workshop, many of the women wanted to be more involved with the household finances and tried to initiate conversations with their husbands, and often tried sharing the tools and materials from the workshops with them, and that kind of got a varied response. Some of them had great conversations with the husbands and went through the materials. Some of the husbands weren't particularly interested. And this is quite common, where the husbands in a married family will be the primary income for the household, and also be in charge of most of the finances, and that kind of stems from kind of Islamic obligations of the man of the family being the provider. Some of the women did work full time but didn't necessarily be involved with the finances, and some of them were part time. And some of them actually spoke about how their relationships broke down with their husbands because of not being involved in the finances and not having open relationships, discussions about the finances in their relationship. And interestingly, when we then ran the workshops with the male participants at Gulf Sharif, although the participants weren't related or anything from the Dartmouth Women's Centre and Gulf Sharif, they were almost mirror images of kind of the discussions. So the men at the workshop acknowledged that they needed to do more to kind of communicate with their partners about their finances and the household finances. And one particular participant had a recent health scare. I think he had a heart attack during the cricket game, and that highlighted for him, the need to communicate about finance, because if anything happened to him, his wife was unaware of who their insurances were, who their mortgages were, and their bank accounts and their savings were. And so it was quite important to get that open communication going. And so just, we've got Afi here who spoke about how she tried to sit down with her husband and go through the materials. And we've got Awais here who spoke about how his perspective on savings changed following the workshop. So since, of course, he opened up a savings account and hasn't touched it. We did also have some participants who opened up Sharia compliant savings accounts, which they didn't have previously. So that was quite an interesting shift based on the information that they gained from the course. They opened up Sharia compliant savings accounts. And then we've got Miriam who's speaking about how she kind of refocused spending. So she thought about what was important to her, and it wasn't about buying a cake or she doesn't need that coffee, and refocusing her spending on what's most important to her. And so then we got some feedback on the actual Islamic finance side of things. So participants found it quite useful to learn about the Islamic finance elements and Sharia compliant finance. However, they didn't feel that it would necessarily begin using Islamic finance products, apart from the ones that I mentioned who opened up savings account, but the majority found it interesting and would want to learn more, but still had reservations about the complexity and added cost of the products. And I think one of the things is that they didn't really know the Islamic banks that were providing these services. So they felt pretty much across the board, they felt that they could do more within the community to be more visible. So both in terms of providing more information on their products and marketing and engaging with the Muslim community, but also being more involved and having a positive impact on those communities, so such as charity or corporate social responsibility initiatives. And it may be, well, that these organizations are currently doing that, but they're not showcasing, the community members aren't really aware of that. And much research has shown that, the Muslim community is very community-based, and so the best way to kind of engage with them is through these types of things and charity events and engage with the community at a grassroots level. And nobody felt that the banks were really doing that. And they did speak about how, in terms of the services compared to conventional banking, such as there were less branches and things like that. Although it was raised that a lot of conventional banks are also reducing their number of branches also. So there may be parity there at some point where in terms of physical branches and access. So following the workshop, we then adapted the materials and produced the ebooks. So I'll wrap this up quickly. And so we produced these ebooks that can be shared, they're PDFs that can be shared online and via WhatsApp, which I'll speak about in a moment. But also they can be printed and shared with community members. And it was really important to make it sort of quite obvious that it was tailored for the community members, and without them even needing to, read it, pick it up and read what it was about. So the design elements took into account that. So we have the typical geometric patterns that are quite common in Islamic architecture and artistry, and also the colors. So the green is quite a significant color. It represents goodness and kind of paradise in Islamic, and a lot of Islamic majority countries' flags use green, and the white represents purity. So it's nothing in terms of the design and the color, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's just something that would be kind of subtly, instantly clear to the Muslim community members that it was something that was relevant for them. And also these ebooks are optimized for mobile viewing. From our previous experience in the previous projects, people often like to access things on their phone. So we optimize these for mobile viewing. So we've not like sort of long, dense paragraphs on each page, so they can just scroll through quite easily and quickly. And I've got a little short clip of an animated video that we produced from these materials that go alongside the books. It's not a final draft, but it's pretty much there. We've just got a few tweaks to make around kind of the diversity of the characters and the pace of it. So I identified that it's particularly effective in engaging with older members of the community, even those with low digital literacy. So we created nudges and signposting for WhatsApp, such as infographics, short animated clips, and WhatsApp infographics. So the experts and our advisory board members, and also in our scoping workshop, as well as the participants, all spoke about how WhatsApp was definitely the best way to communicate to the Muslim PB community, particularly those with low literacy. And I know my own experience with members of the family who English isn't my best, and they're not communicating with what. So as a result, we produced some infographics which were taken from the materials that were just easy to sort of quite digestible and short, that the organisations could communicate and share via their WhatsApp groups, which already have set up as they communicate quite regularly with weekly newsletters and things like that via WhatsApp, so they can share those. And some of the key lessons learned from the project to establish trust with the community. So that can be via existing established community organizations. So we did this through our advisory group. And this is really key, because when the community see the trusted organization is part of working with you, then they will trust kind of the outputs and also being engaged with what you're trying to deliver. And this needs to be kind of local to the community that you're dealing with. So for example, if it was a national initiative and like we've run it in Birmingham, but we took these materials and showcased them in London or in other parts of the country, because we've got certain organisations, like a local mosque, and we're going into other mosques, they would still engage and trust that the other mosque was involved as well. So that gives you some kind of currency with other communities outside of Birmingham. Also engaging with trusted community members. So we've seen this in the past where kind of you have ambassadors within a community. This doesn't necessarily need to be a leader or a local council or anything like that. It can just be the next door neighbour or the next door neighbour's child who's gone to university and is trusted by certain members of that community because they feel that they're educated or that they'll understand and be able to give them advice on certain things. So engaging with those members of the community. We had some participants who actually attended who were financially, they were fine themselves. They were professionals and quite were quite affluent, to be honest. But they said that they'd kind of come along to kind of see what they might be missing, what they might be things that little tweaks and things that they can do to how they manage their finance and share what they're learning with other community members that they knew who were struggling but might not actually attend workshops like this. So it's really key to engage with those types of trusted community members, and tailoring the message and the content and make it clear that it's aimed at the Muslim community. So like we've done throughout, we've tailored everything and thought about how we can engage and make it clear that it's tailored for the Muslim community. So what's next? So we're going to continue to share the materials through our network and their network as well. And all the organizations that we're working with are putting us in touch with other organizations, so it's growing in that way, which is fantastic. And we're looking to further tailor the materials for different Muslim groups in the UK, such as refugees. So we've got some small funding to kind of test some of these materials and tailor them further with refugees based in Coventry from Muslim majority countries. And then we're going to be launching the Muslim Money Skills website, which we didn't really have funding to develop a full app like we did for Money Skills. But we're just putting a simple website together so people can access the materials online. And then also launch part 2 of our toolkit, which is like a manual for practitioners and organizations to how to roll out and engage with the Muslim community. And hopefully we can continue to add to the materials. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hussan, for your great presentation. That was very interesting, with important and impactful implication at multiple levels, really. So it's important because your project addresses the gaps in knowledge and also identifies opportunities and specific needs of Muslim communities and their use of financial services.